So Rule 8, action to avoid collision. A. Any action taken to avoid collision shall be taken into accordance with the rules of this part, and shall, if the circumstances of the case admit, be positive, made in ample time, and with due regard to the observance of good seamanship. Obviously, in accordance with the rules of this part means that the action is to comply with the rules, be positive, and we still got to observe good seamanship. B. Any alteration of course and or speed to avoid collision shall, if the circumstances of the case admit, be large enough to readily apparent to another vessel observing visually or by radar. A succession of small alterations of course and or speed shall be avoided. So, for example, also for a further example, let's watch this video.
In this crossing situation, obviously the blue vessel is going to have to keep out of the way of the green vessel. If they just make a small alteration, yes, they've made a bit of an alteration, but the green vessel hasn't been able to see what they're doing. And of course, as the blue one gets closer, they've got to make another alteration, and this is what we mean by a series of alterations. It's not obvious to the green vessel what the blue vessel is doing. And of course, the blue vessel has got to continue making more and more alterations until they get clear. Instead of that, what they should do is make one single bold alteration. Now, when the green vessel is looking over, they can immediately see that the blue one has taken action. They can see a complete change in aspect. They'll actually be seeing the vessel head on now, instead of seeing the broad starboard aspect.
C. If there is sufficient sea room, alteration of course alone may be the most effective action to avoid close quarters. Situations provided that if it is made in good time, is substantial and does not result in another close quarter situation. And so let's watch this another video to understand what this paragraph is saying.
The easiest way to explain this is to look at a speed alteration. In this case, the blue vessel is going to halve her speed. There, she's instantly halved her speed of approach to try and avoid collision. And look at how close she gets to that green vessel. That alteration of speed was not an effective alteration. And bear in mind, in this diagram, that alteration happened instantaneously. In a real life example, of course, you'd have to allow time to run that speed off. From this, we can see alteration of course alone may be the most effective action. It's immediately obvious, it's very easy to undertake, and you don't need to allow all that time to let speed run off your vessel.
D. Action taken to avoid collisions with another vessel shall be such as to result in passing at a safe distance. The effectiveness of the action shall be carefully checked until the other vessel is finally passed and clear. So you need to take action that's gonna keep you into a safe distance. And then you need to continue checking until the other vessel is finally passed and clear. E. If necessary to avoid collision or allow more time to assess the situation, a vessel shall slacken her speed or take away by stopping or reversing her means of propulsion. Obviously, this paragraph is actually a very much common sense paragraph, so let's proceed to the next. So F has three parts. First is a vessel which by any of these rules is required not to impede the passage or safe passage of another vessel shall, when required by the circumstances of the case, take early action to allow sufficient sea room for the safe passage of the other vessel. So couple of things in here. Obviously, the first thing that stands out is about not impeding the passage, safe passage. We're not talking about avoiding collision. We're talking about allowing sufficient sea room for vessels. Part 2. A vessel required not to impede the passage or safe passage of another. Vessel is not relieved to this obligation if approaching the other vessel so as the involved risk of collision, and shall, when taking actions, have full regard to the action which may be required by the rules of this part. What this basically means is that you cannot say a risk conclusion exists, and we're going to apply the crossing situation rule and stand on. So let's watch this video for an example.
For example here, we know the container vessel is actually the give-way vessel. The green vessel is just meant to be allowing her sufficient sea room. But the action the green vessel takes needs to bear in mind what the container vessel may do. So, the green vessel alters round to port, she's got to remember that the container vessel may have taken action, assuming she is the give-way vessel, which she actually is. In this case, constrained by a draft, she can't deviate from her course really, so all she's going to do is slow right down, and that's put the two on a collision course again. What the green vessel needs to do is bear in mind the action that she may take, which is why the typical thing to do would be to make a bold alteration round to starboard and parallel the course of the container vessel.
So part 3. A vessel, the passage of which is not to be impeded, remains fully obliged to comply with the rules of this part, when the two vessels are approaching one another so as to involve risk of collision. So in our example, although the green vessel is meant not to impede the passage, the container ship remains fully obliged to comply with the rules of this part. When they're approaching one another, involving collision, which means it's still a crossing situation, the container vessel is still the giveaway vessel, even though the green one should allow her sufficient sea room. And that's the end of the discussion about Rule 8, action to avoid collision.